meditation is stillness, and in a world that values movement, stillness is frowned upon.
You know, it's the whole idea of yin and yang. You have to have that quality stillness to have more quality in the movement. Break down these 5 underlying pillars in a meditation practice, and I call them the 5 regulations. And they're regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. When you move and you're doing these movement practices, it's not just one movement to go grab the glass of water. It's a million movements to go grab the glass of water. And the more that you can break it down and notice those energetic transfers in all of the little small muscle groups in your forearm that are changing to make that thing happen, you start to see things. He said something to me after about 2 or 3 weeks of getting to work with him that changed my life forever, in that he said,
Jeff Patterson, it's so good to have you here today.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Jeff, I want to dive straight into the practice of meditation. Nowadays, there seems to be a lot of advice out there on how to meditate, what are the best methods. Do you visualize? Do you note? Do you do a mantra meditation? Please explain to me what meditation means to you and how your meditative philosophy differs from traditional ones.
So there is so many different meditative practices out there, and there's no one right way to do it. You know, there's many different methods, from movement practices to sitting practices, breath work, things like Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga are all forms of a movement meditation. There's different energetic work, different visualization practices. Our philosophy is about creating an evolving life practice with the meditative arts. And first, one of the most important things for anybody to think about is, what path are they looking to follow with a meditative practice? So I've got meditation broke down into kind of 5 main paths that people can follow. And the first one is more of the athletic side of the practice. So these days, a lot of professional athletes have turned to the meditative arts because it helps improve their performance. It gives them better timing, better focus, the ability to stay more present during high stressful kind of situations. And so this is one avenue we can follow. Then there's more of the therapeutic side of the practice, which is for our longevity, for helping us deal with injuries, for being more present in the body. Then there's more of the medical side of the practice. And you know, all of Chinese medicine is based off of Qigong theory, which is one of the pillars in a meditation practice. And then there is the philosophical side of the training, which has always been one of my kind of passions and interest, because in the philosophical side of the practice, it teaches you how to, you know, open up your peripheral vision and see things from multiple angles and have different perspectives on things. And so it's really fascinating to me. And then there's the spiritual side of the practice that, you know, I think a lot of people, when they think of meditation, they just relate that spiritual side of the practice to that word, when there really is many other directions that you can take it. So once you've found what path you want to follow, then we integrate different practices that will help us kind of accelerate down that path, if you will.
Nice. And I like how you said at the end, once you decide which path to follow, because you don't have to go for all of them, not at the same time at least, and not all of them are meant for everyone. So in a way, navigating through them and finding what works for you is very, very important. However, most people I've talked to regarding meditation, including myself, find it very difficult to practice meditation or remain consistent with it. Why do you think the majority of people finding challenging to practice? Is it that we have unrealistic expectations of what the right practice looks like? Or just false expectations of what the results we thought are going to be?
You know, for myself, you know, I've been teaching the meditative arts now for over 30 years. And one of the biggest challenges I have is getting people to dive into the practice and really make it part of their life so they can reap all the benefits of the practice. And so through the years, I've experimented with many different things and tried to find ways to help people so they can get to the point where they quit looking at it like a chore they have to do every day, and they start seeing it as an opportunity and something that they get to do every day because there's so many great benefits that come from the practice. Well, I've found that I put together kind of 3 considerations, if you will, for people when they come to the practice, or maybe they've struggled with the practice and haven't been real successful with it. Whereas if they spend some time thinking about these 3 things and follow that, I feel like it gives them a good foundation and helps them be a lot more successful in the practice. And briefly, I'll explain what I'm talking about. So the first one is thinking about why you're being drawn to the practice. What do you want to accomplish by integrating meditation into your life? And then if you do accomplish that and you reach that goal, think about maybe 10 or 20 things that will positively change in your life by accomplishing that goal. Maybe it's improved relationships or improved work mentality, or, your old interpersonal conflicts, or helping you with your physiology or your mental thoughts or your emotions, whatever that is for you. And then flip the coin. And if you don't accomplish that goal, think about 10 or 20 things that will be negatively affected in your life and how that will influence you. And we do this because we want to create some kind of a fuel that helps us. We all have those days where the alarm goes off and it's time to get up and do our practice, and we're like, I'm just going to hit the snooze button. I'll do it tomorrow. But if you have this fuel and you have some reasons as to why it's kind of pushing and pulling you in that direction, and you see all those benefits, it helps us stay consistent, which is the next important consideration, because consistency is where it's all at. There's this ancient Chinese story that I really enjoy about this stonecutter, and he was very well known. He created these beautiful sculptures of different animals, and people knew about him from all around. And he was so well known that people would travel and come and stay with him for years at a time to learn the trade from him. Well, every morning he used to go out to the river and meditate first thing before he did anything else. And one day he was walking along the river and he had this really profound vision of seeing this 6-foot-tall mystical Chinese dragon made out of jade. And he was so taken by this vision that he decided this was going to be his next project. So as you can imagine, trying to find a stone of that size, it's very difficult. So he traveled around for the next 3 months, searching everywhere, trying to find the perfect piece of jade for this work. Once he found it, he brought it back to his shop. He spent the first few days just studying the stone and trying to feel the energy from the rock and trying to see how this dragon was going to evolve out of the rock. Once he began working, he picked one place on the back of the rock, placed his chisel very carefully, and started tapping away at the rock. Hundreds, if not thousands of times a day, he's tapping away at the rock. A few days go by and nothing changes. A few more days go by and his apprentices started kind of second guessing him and wondering if he was needing to try something else because nothing was changing. He kept at it and a few more days went by, and finally he tapped the rock and this big section came off the backside of the rock, and it created this smooth, beautiful kind of curved line that was soon going to be part of the dragon's back. And one of his apprentices asked him and said, "How did you know that that strike was going to break the rock?" And the stonecutter said, "It wasn't that strike that broke the rock. It was the thousands of strikes before it that broke the rock." And with a little bit of frustration, the apprentice said, "But I've been watching you and nothing was happening. There was no scratches, no marks, nothing. Why didn't you try something different?" And so the stonecutter got down on one knee and he felt the smooth edge that he just created on the rock. And he said, each strike was not wasted. The stone was changing beneath the surface. And oftentimes we can't see things with the naked eye and how it's happening, but we make these changes and they're evolving from the work that we're doing. And many times, not only is the rock changing beneath the surface, but the one who wields the hammer is getting benefits from the change as well. And I love this story in that it's so closely related to the meditative arts, in that, with meditation, we're practicing movement practices, sitting, breath work, we're studying these philosophical concepts. And oftentimes we don't see the change day to day, but by that consistent effort, we're building that foundation and creating that opportunity to bear fruits in the future. And so consistency is an extremely important thing to consider. And then the third and final thing to be aware of is that you need to find a guide when you're taking on a meditation practice. It's a very deep topic. I've been studying for 36 years and I'm still just a student learning all the time. It's, if you think that you're going to go on YouTube and sift through the millions of videos out there, find this app or that app and find something that works for you, you're going to waste a lot of time and you're never going to get much deeper than the surface.
You'll just get more confused.
Yeah, and so having somebody there to help you, really discovering what your why is and understanding the importance of consistency. If you do those three things, I find that it'll help with your motivation. It'll give you more substance to kind of push through those times of maybe uncertainty and help you be a lot more successful with your practice.
Beautiful to say. Nice. I like that. And the first one you mentioned is more or less finding your why. Like having that strong why to carry you through in the difficult moments, because you do need a very, very strong why to carry you through exactly what you just said, all those repetitive moments where you see no result until you see result. I'm curious, what has been your why when you started your journey? What has been your why that kept you for 36 years working on meditation?
So I was originally introduced to meditation in a bit of a roundabout way, in that as a fairly young guy, I was very much into Western boxing. I love the thrill of the sport and the challenge and everything about it. And I used to go to a boxing gym just a few blocks down the street here from my academy. And at a boxing gym, for those of you that are unfamiliar with them, they're usually run a lot different than your normal traditional style fitness classes where there's a coach or instructor up in front of a group of students. At a boxing gym, usually there might be 4 or 5 instructors or coaches running around, and each one of them might have a handful of fighters that they're working with. Well, at this one particular gym, one of the coaches that was there was a very well-known coach. He had created champions in both the amateur and the professional arena, and I really wanted to get to spend some time with him. And so he wasn't taking on any new fighters though. And so I'd always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there. I'd work hard. I'd let him know that I wanted to work with him. I'd ask him questions here and there. And finally, after following him around for about 3 or 4 months, he started giving me some tips and really helping me out a little bit. And he said something to me after about 2 or 3 weeks of getting to work with him that changed my life forever. In that he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now, at the time, I was this young kid thinking, isn't Tai Chi for old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better fighter, And I started doing the practice, and it changed my life in so many ways through the years. And I've been very fortunate here at my academy. I've had over 26,000 students come through the school, and I've heard literally hundreds of stories of how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives. And that's what's made me so motivated to not only continue my own practice, but to become a better teacher and better at the practice so I can help influence more people's lives in that way, and just continuing spreading the word out there.
Nice. That's a powerful why. A lot of people counting on you spreading your message.
Yes.
So you always hear people say, I don't have time to meditate. Meditating is boring, or like meditation is even a waste of time. What is your best argument as to how someone can benefit and why they should start right away, like to all the skeptics of meditation?
Well, there's a couple things there. And the first one, when somebody says meditation is boring, they they have a very narrow view on what meditation is,
Mm.
because there's so many different ways that you can integrate meditation into your life. It's very complex and nothing but boring. Now, if all your view of meditation is sitting down and counting your breaths, I can see how some people might think that that seems like it might be boring, but there's a lot more complexity to it like that, and that's why having a guide is very helpful. As far as somebody who says, I don't have time, that's one of the most common things that I'll hear people say. And what I've found through the years in teaching thousands of students is that people seem to get more time when they integrate a meditation practice into their life, because when you're battling for time and you've got a lot of things on your plate, a lot of times you're very distracted and you're not really focused on anything with any kind of depth. And
Mm.
by integrating meditation into your life, you start to be more present and more aware, and you start to become more productive because you're more focused, which in turn allows you to get more things done. And so I found it's kind of the opposite, even though it does, yes, take a little bit of time to do the practice. However, I find that most people seem to get more done by integrating the practice. And that's why so many high power CEOs and business professionals are turning to meditation, because they see this benefit and they understand that it will help them perform better.
Nice, nice. To me personally, meditation is stillness, and in a world that values movement, stillness is frowned upon. We live in a world that values productivity and outcomes more than the process itself, and or the simple act of being. How can we shift our mindset so that we can appreciate stillness and stop feeling the pressure to constantly trying to make ourselves busy and chasing the illusion of progress?
It's such a balance, right? You know, it's the whole idea of yin and yang. You have to have that quality stillness to have more quality in the movement. And it's just kind of like music, you know. If I was to beat on a drum, you know, 100 times a minute, it wouldn't really sound like good music. But if I started putting a rhythm to it and maybe had fluctuations in timing, now it starts to become pretty rhythmic and kind of fun to listen to. And having that ability to pay attention to the spaces in between is extremely valuable, not only for what we're doing, but for our own interpersonal relationships and how we see things in our bodies and in our minds, our emotions, all of those things. It's extremely important.
Beautiful. And what role does breath work play into meditation? I know it is important, but is it something necessary, or is it completely optional depending on the state of mind that you want to achieve?
Yeah, breathing is one of the pillars in any meditation practice. And, you know, I break down these 5 underlying pillars in a meditation practice, and I call them the 5 regulations. And they're regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the energy, and regulating the spirit. And briefly, I'll kind of touch on what I mean when I say these 5 different foundations. So regulating the body is basically understanding your skeletal alignment and your muscular tension in the body, and being able to monitor that and regulate that through all of our activities and everything we do all day, every day. And an example would be, think about maybe one time you're sitting down at your computer and you've been there 3 or 4 hours and your shoulders are rounded forward and you're starting to feel lethargic and maybe your neck's getting sore. And then another time when the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and you feel like you're on top of the world. Well, these 2 different energetic states we're in 100% control of all day, every day. And so learning how to regulate that and be aware of that in all of our activities is extremely valuable. And a little bit of a deeper level of body regulation would be maintaining some kind of muscular structure in the body, maintaining flexibility, eating healthy nutrients so we can keep proper energy coming into the body, and then lastly, making sure that we're getting enough sleep. and monitoring these things. And this is all part of the body regulation. Then we have regulating the breath. Regulating the breath is an extremely deep topic, and oftentimes Qigong is referred to as the science of the breath because there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies. And because of that, we broadly categorize them into yin methods and yang methods. And the yin methods are often deeper, more holistic style of meditations that bring the energy inward. And an example of this, if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. And so if we want to emulate that style of energetic expression in the body, we can do longer inhales, soft retentions at the end of the inhale, and shorter exhales. And this will help bring that energy inward, which is great for stress reduction, dealing with anxiety, with panic attacks, with boosting our creativity. There's many reasons why we would do this yin side of the breath. Then we have the yang side of the breath. This is more aggressive. It's kind of like if you ever had to push your car, maybe you pick up something heavy, your natural instinct is exhale, put tension in the breath, make the breath audible. This helps bring the energy out. And when we understand how to use this breath strategically in our ritual practices as well as our active practices, we can use it to regulate our physical, mental, and emotional well-being throughout the day. And so this is a very valuable tool and piece of our meditation practice. Then the third pillar is regulating the mind. And just as with the breath, this is a very deep topic. And we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when we started talking about distractions. You know, a lot of times people will say, I've tried meditation, but it just didn't work for me. I couldn't quiet my mind. Somewhere along the way, people got this misguided idea that in order to be successful in meditation, you have to reach this state of nirvana and be in this blissful place where nothing bothers you. Well, it couldn't be further from the truth. You know, I've spent the last 36 years of my life traveling around the world, training with some amazing meditation practitioners, and I have never once met anybody who doesn't get distracted. Everybody does. That's part of the process. But when you're doing a meditation, whether it's a movement practice or a still practice, if you're sitting, say, for 20 minutes and you get distracted 50 times during that session, every time you get distracted, you recognize the imbalance, you use your posture, your movement, your breath, whatever, to bring you back to center. Now you do that 50 times every day. You just got 50 repetitions on how to be out of balance and how to find focus. And if you do that every day, every month, every year, you start to develop this power and this ability to find that focus underneath any kind of chaos or distraction. And so it's very valuable in that sense. You know, there's this story of these two old monks. They're walking down this dirt road after a huge rainstorm. They come up to this big mud puddle, and there's this beautiful little girl on the other side of the puddle, and she's standing there in a white dress, and she's crying. And the older monk, he yells across the puddle and says, "Is everything okay? Can we help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." So the older monk, he rolls up his pant legs and he walks across the puddle and picks her up, puts her on his back and takes her to the other side, sets her down, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking a couple miles down the road, and finally the younger monk is just furious, and he says, "You know we're not supposed to touch girls, but you did back there at the puddle." And the older monk looks down and says, "You're still thinking about that girl? I left her back there at the puddle." And how many times in life do we got to get 2 miles down the muddy road before we realize we need to let that go, right? And so regulating the mind is a very important part of the practice as well. Then the fourth pillar is regulating the energy. And regulating the energy is a very deep topic, something we could talk for hours about, but the basic idea of it is, once we've reached a competent level in regulating the body, the breath, and the mind, we now have the tools to send the energy inward, to extend it outward, to circulate it through the body, to get different outcomes and different expressions in our physical, mental, and emotional states. And then finally, the fifth regulation is regulating the spirit, which is very profound, and it's something that meditation practitioners will often spend their entire life's journey working towards that stage of enlightenment. And so when you understand these 5 underlying principles of a meditation practice, you can see that it really will affect anything you do in life.
Wow, there's so much more to this philosophy of meditation that I thought. To me, I have a very surface level opinion of meditation, and you speaking about it in this way, it's very intriguing just to sit down and think about it more and take it more seriously and be more intentional about it. I just want to ask before I move on, do you think good breathing practices should precede meditation, or is it something that you would start at the same time? Let's say I've never done meditation before and I want to start. Should I become good at some certain breathing techniques that would calm me down and put me in a certain state? Or is it something that it's okay as I go along, I can practice? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's part of the practice. So, you could start at any point and you don't need to reach a certain level before you begin a meditation practice with your breath work. I think there are things that we do within our meditation practice that helps educate the breath, and we find different ways that we can utilize the breath to get different outcomes. I often will hear people here at my academy, we do not just meditation, we also have martial art classes. And sometimes I'll hear people say, oh, well, yeah, I want to start doing this, but I want to wait till I get in shape first. Well, this is what's going to help you get in shape. So why wait? Why not use this?
Right.
And it's the same thing with breath work and meditation. They're kind of hand in hand, the same thing.
Gotcha. Could you please, I would love for you to share what has been the most meditative transformational story you've ever heard or witnessed, and what perhaps the audience can learn from it as well.
There's been so many through the years, for myself and then also through my students, hearing their stories and how they've transformed through the practice. One that always comes to mind when I think about my students is back almost 30 years ago when I first started the academy. I had a student come in who wanted to learn sword fighting, and he was a very successful businessman. He was about 55 years old, maybe 53, somewhere in that range. And he had a very extremely high stress career. And, he came in, he was as stiff as a 2x4, his whole physiology was locked in place and he was very rigid. And after getting to know him a little bit, it was only a couple weeks, I was like, it might be good today. How about we do some meditation? And he started doing a meditation practice and integrating some Tai Chi in his training. And here now, almost 30 years later, he's still here at the academy. And after a couple years, though, his whole physiology changed. You'll see him, from walking around like a robot to being more relaxed and more present. And it was really amazing to see that transformation in him. And obviously he thought there was some benefit there. He still wouldn't be around 30 years later, but he's in his mid 80s right now, and he's still coming in here to the academy and, kind of part of the family. And it's, seeing stories like that is what makes me so passionate about trying to get these arts out there, because it's not just helping somebody lose 5 pounds or 10 pounds. It's like you're transforming their whole mentality and way of life that affects everything they do. And, there's just endless benefits from a practice like this.
Oh, that's so awesome. It definitely makes me want to consider meditation now. You're also a martial arts instructor with the equivalent of black belts in many arts such as Muay Thai or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, to the eyes of the average person, martial arts which may seem as aggressive and meditation which is very harmonic and peaceful, it doesn't seem to make sense in combining them. What role has meditation played in your fighting life? How do you combine those two?
Well, and a lot of people ask me that because I was introduced to meditation from my boxing coach. And they're like,
Yeah.
boxing, how's boxing going to help you? Or how's that going to work? And there's so many benefits by integrating meditation that it improves your overall body awareness. It improves your timing. It improves your roots so you're more stable, so you have more power. It gives you the idea of how to use some of these conceptual practices like yielding, which is great for athletics and dealing with stronger, bigger opponents. Your mindset, your focus, all of these different things can help any athlete. And that's why so many professional athletes these days are turning to the meditative arts to help improve their performance. Yielding, which is always been something that's been very fascinating to me, and it's used in both the meditative and the martial arts. In my most recent book, The Yielding Warrior, I break down yielding into 3 pillars. There's physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us trying to see who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force, and now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. Now, it's obvious how this is beneficial in athletics because no matter what sport you play, there's going to be athletes that are bigger and stronger and faster than you. And so learning how to deal with this rather than confront it can be very beneficial. Now, in order to be good at physical yielding, you have to be well-rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed. The breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, while it may be a lifetime practice to really get to a high level of this, once you have started a meditation practice, even from day one, you start to see these things more clearly inside yourself. And this is where it becomes very interesting because now not only do you see these things more clearly in yourself, but you also start to see them more clearly in other people. Right. And this is where we start moving into what we call mental yielding. So say, for example, you and I are having a conversation and I say something that unsettles you and I pick up on it right from that first sign of imbalance. It's a lot easier at this point to adjust the conversation to keep us in a happy place than if I'm not paying attention to that. And pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to knock me upside the head. And so learning how to use yielding in all of our interactions is extremely powerful. One, we're being more considerate, which is something that we could all do more of. And 2, it allows us to be strategic in our interactions so we can guide conversations to a positive outcome with the least amount of resistance. And this is beneficial in relationships, in business, in sales, and negotiations. There's so many ways we can apply this strategy. And then the third and final pillar of yielding is emotional yielding. And emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but with our own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about oftentimes when something happens to us, we'll respond and we'll go down this path. And we might get an hour, a day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But with yielding and our ability to integrate meditation into our lives, we're able to kind of sit back, be more present, not let our emotions get involved, and oftentimes make decisions that save us a lot of heartache on the other side. And I've been explaining this idea of yielding now for over 30 years. I've been running this academy, and one of the most common things I'll hear people say is, yielding makes a lot of sense. In fact, I do yielding all the time. Well, I would agree in that I think everybody does some degree of yielding all the time. However, it's kind of like if you or I were to walk into a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, I guarantee you that person would see things about the series of events and the timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And the meditative arts helps us see things inside of ourselves and inside of other people that I truly believe most people will go through life without any clue of them unless they have a practice like this in their life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You mentioned on the physical yielding how you need to have a strong root. What about having a similar strong root in your personal life? How does that look like? Although you touched a little bit with the emotional yielding at the end, but
Yes.
if you could dive a little bit more, how does it look like having a strong root in your personal life, or maybe in your relationships at work, or just through discipline?
Yeah, that's such an important part of the practice because, we talked about consistency and the importance of that in our practice. Well, not only with consistency, but meditation also heightens our awareness. And
Mm.
through this awareness, we're able to be more stable and more centered, which gives us a better mental and emotional root. Because if we have something that throws us off center, and then we start thinking of the next negative thing and the next negative thing, and it leads us down this path that's kind of hard to stop after a little while, as opposed to being very centered and rooted and in a positive mindset. And then something happens and recognizing this happens and realizing that's not me, that's something that happened. It's easy to come back to center and be focused. And now I can think about that from a strategic viewpoint rather than an emotional viewpoint. And so that root is very effective, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally as well.
Interesting. And for these last 36 years that you've been doing martial arts, what would you say is the biggest lesson you learned through your discipline? If you could, you know, track it down to one or maybe two, what are those?
There's been so many life lessons. I think that the idea of having that foundation and that consistent practice in my life has been a game changer for me because not only has it given me the discipline and integrity and perseverance to get to a high level in my practice, but because of that, it's influenced everything I do in my life and my relationships and my work and my hobbies and my
Mm.
music, everything I love to do, it's influenced by this one thing, and so I think having that is probably the biggest life lesson.
Nice. And 36 years is not little. And people nowadays, including me not so long ago, had a very skewed idea of what mastery looks like, you know. You go to the gym for a month or two and you think, oh, I don't have the results, and here you're talking about 36 years. So I'm sure that it took you a lot, and I want you to tell me, what did you take for you to reach the mastery you have achieved? And I want to know, please, who you had to become and what you had to sacrifice in order to dedicate yourself.
Yeah, so there have been many sacrifices because, there's days where there's other things that you'd rather be doing. We all
Yeah.
have these things, right? And it's but I've had this, and in the beginning, I guess I had a little bit of help in that when I started my meditation journey, I did it because I was trying to impress my boxing coach and I wanted him to really take me on as a student. And so I was doing it every day and I never missed a day because if he would have asked me one day when I used to see him 5 days a week. And if he would say, "Hey, did you do your practice day?" And I had to tell him no, I would feel horrible. So I did it every day religiously, like I'm brushing my teeth. And that consistency really helped kind of set the pace. And through the years, while it has been challenging at times, it's brought so many rewards from the practice that, I would never change it for a thing. And for the average person out there, I mean, this has been my life's journey, so it's a little bit different than when I'm teaching somebody who's wanting to integrate it into just their lifestyle.
Mhm.
It's not that you need to retire to a cave and spend the rest of your life meditating to
Mm.
take on this practice. If you just, I always tell new students that if you could just do a 20-minute ritual a day, meaning turning off the computer screens, turning off the audios, and just turning your focus inward for 20 minutes a day, and then integrating some active practices that can be done when you're walking down the street or standing in line at the grocery store. These are a great way to help us stay in tune throughout the day, because if you meditate every day and you have some discipline and you feel good when you're doing your practice, but the whole rest of the day you're off center and out of balance, kind of doesn't make any sense. And so these active practices help kind of keep us focused. And then we also integrate some of these philosophical ideas that can be used in our ritual and our active practices. And if you use those in that combination, it doesn't need to be a change of lifestyle really for you. You don't need to take out things that you want to do. You can just integrate this into what you're doing, and you'll find that through the consistent effort, the things that you love to do will only be improved by the practice.
Nice. So it seems to me that it's all about a perspective change of how you view meditation. And that's why people such as yourself are very important in giving people a different perspective. And again, to the uneducated, at first glance, martial arts seem like a discipline that just trains the body. But I can safely make the case that they're fortifying the mind as well, as much as the body, if not more. Can you please give us some examples of how martial arts can help you with your mindset, your thoughts, or even managing emotions?
So even in the external arts like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Western boxing or Muay Thai boxing, a lot of the concepts that we study in the meditative arts are used in boxing and Jiu-Jitsu. And so you'll find that some of these life lessons can be intertwined pretty well. And in fact, before I ever even made the connection of the body awareness through Tai Chi into Western boxing, when my coach was having me train in the very beginning, I'll never forget the moment that I figured out why he was telling me to do the practice. I was maybe 20 years old, and I was at a party with another boxer who was there, who was 6-7 years my senior, amazing boxer, just phenomenal. And I was watching him kind of goof around. He was walking around the room, and he was transferring his weight and stepping down and loading up off his back foot and then moving really slowly forward as if he was doing Tai Chi. And he had never heard of, I mean, maybe he heard of it, but he'd never practiced a Tai Chi in a day in his life. But he was such a high level in boxing that he was integrating the slow movement and the coordination and the energy transfer from one foot to the other as if we do in Tai Chi. And I was like, oh, he's teaching me to break it down. He's trying to get me to see things on a finer level. It's like, if you've ever watched the Discovery Channel and saw like where they video a flower in bloom, and they'll take 1 million pictures of it from the time it's a bud till when it blooms up into a flower. And you watch that in slow motion. When you move and you're doing these movement practices, it's not just one movement to go grab the glass of water. It's 1 million movements to go grab the glass of water. And the more that you can break it down and notice those energetic transfers and all of the little small muscle groups in your forearm that are changing to make that thing happen, you start to see things from a different perspective and a higher level of awareness, which is kind of what the practice is about.
Nice, beautiful. To become a master in anything, let alone Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you need discipline, which means you have to be very good at habit formation, routines, and persistently showing up. Could you please share some of the best habits you had to build in order to become a black belt, in order to write a book, in order to show up for the people you love the most, or any difficult or important thing in your life? As well as, if you can, please, a morning routine that you have followed the longest and has been the most beneficial in your life.
Yeah, so every morning I have a ritual practice that I do. I haven't missed my ritual practice in 5 years since I had my hip surgery. And even when I was laying in bed from my hip surgery, I was doing breathing techniques and I was doing something. But it's just part of who I am. And I think having that consistency and that foundation has changed everything I do, and probably one of the biggest influences on my success in the martial arts and the meditative arts is from that morning ritual and consistency. And then, with the arts themselves is having a passion to, one, I love them. It's something that I really enjoy the time being on the mat. I've spent tens of thousands of hours on the mat doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it's very strategic. It's challenging. It's fun to help students kind of figure things out and stop being so rigid and learn how to build that confidence and change their lifestyle. I've had students come in here that are so timid. You wouldn't think that they could fight their way out of a kindergarten bathroom, and after 2 years, their whole mentality changes and they feel confident walking down the street again, and those kinds of stories are very rewarding to see that and to be able to actually change somebody's mentality for the rest of their life, and so that's always been very rewarding.
Beautiful. Okay, Jeff, final question for you. If you had to choose one thing and one thing only to be remembered for, what would that be?
Being a influential, transformational leader that helps people live a better life.
That's powerful. Well, Jeff, thank you very much. It has been a beautiful conversation, and you definitely make me consider meditation starting tomorrow morning. I'm going to give it a go in perfect action and take it from there. All right,
Nice.
Jeff, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.